Today on For Your Home, we're going to do a little gardening and build a raised walkway. So put on your garden shoes and come have fun playing in the dirt with me. It's all coming up next right here on For Your Home. I just love this little side yard garden of mine, but before I can initiate some of the great plans I have for it, I need to deal with some water issues. You know, the drain spouts from my house and my neighbor's house come down into this area. Well, we thought we had the problem solved because they go into piping that runs underground and it takes the water off downhill to the flower bed in the front. That's still not enough because the dirt from my house and my neighbor's house, it's banked away from the house, which is what it should be. You never want to do it the opposite way. But just that fall of the ground causes water to run to the center. And as you can see, it's always muddy here. The stepping stones we thought would be the solution, but they just don't work. If we try to mulch up the bed, a little bit of rain washes the mulch over the stepping stones, so we got to do something different. We decided to come up with an idea to raise up our walk through this little side garden by building a raised wooden walkway. And I think it can be really charming. You know, and we can accent it with our plants all around it. It'll be the perfect solution. But before we can do that, we've got to lay out exactly where we want our pathway to go. This is just a beautiful day to be gardening, late fall, and obviously my neighbors think so too because they're all out working in their yard today, mowing and hedging. You know, when you get ready to do any kind of a flower bed or a walkway, there's a lot of different ways you can lay it out. One of the mistakes I see a lot of people do is they use spray paint, and then they go through and then they change their mind and then they spray it again, and then they change their mind again and they respray it, and pretty soon you don't know what you got going. So I found a technique that works really well for me, and I'm going to use that for our pathway. You want to start off with just a garden hose and try to find one that is as flexible as possible around your house, if that's even possible. But start by securing it. I just use a plant labeling stake down here at the end to keep the end from moving on me. And the reason I like to use this is I can shape it the way I want it to go all the way down without having to really be set with my decision. So if I decide, for example, I want to come in closer to this little hosta and fern with the wooden walkway, I can just move my hose, and don't worry about little kinks. This is just the basic shape. And then as we come on along, we don't want it to be too curvy because it's wood, but we want it to have a little bit of interest to it. So we're going to come in this area here, and then let's let it bow back out just a little bit this way, and keep working all the way down until you get it just exactly the way you think you want to have it. Okay, I think I'm getting the general idea of how I like it to look. You know, it's not, the hose isn't perfectly straight, but it still gives me a good plan. I'm coming right along here and I'm bowing out around these elephant ears and the plantings that I have there. And then I want it just to gently curve right back and start going back in. Why? Well, first of all, it's gonna look prettier than a straight one, but you see what I have right here on the wall? These are all the power boxes. Now, I've got plans, but it's going to take a long time. This is a little bay tree that's planted here. I get bay leaves of it when I cook, and it's going to grow up and hide that. But I still want to be able to be on the walkway and reach over and work with the circuit breaker or do any kind of maintenance that I need. So in order to be able to do that, this has got to come in just a little bit more. See how we're adjusting it as we go along? That way you can reach your power panel. So think about that as well without having to step over into your flower bed. Okay, then it needs to come back out a little bit and come across here. Why do I want it to bow out here? Well, that's because of my little angel right over here. I love this little statue, and years ago a friend of mine helped me put a French glaze on it, and I've had her in my garden ever since. And she's got her own little place of power right in the middle of all of the hostas and the peonies and the different ferns. So I want this sidewalk to come out closer to her so that as you're walking down, you go, oh, she's right there. So that's going to be part of the curve. And then as we come down through here, we're gonna need to let this walkway bow a little bit more over this way, because look at this tree. The tree limb that we have hanging out here, we don't want to run into it on our walkway. So once you get this side placed the way you like it, so you have all of those little garden details and architectural elements in place, then you're ready to go in with your spray paint and outline a really nice smooth line all the way down, okay? Then you'll know exactly where your walkway is going to lay out on one side. On the other side, well, our walkway is going to be about 36 inches wide, just wide enough for a person to stroll through. I'm not building a boardwalk here, just a little raised garden path. So it's going to be 36 inches wide. So I'm just going to then take a tape measure and measure from my painted line over 36 inches and paint another spot. That way it'll give me both sides of my parallel layout of my garden path. The next step will be, of course, to start moving some plants around. Once I decided exactly where I wanted the pathway to go through the shade garden, I got busy making some calls, got a hold of my handyman, and got him on the project. This is my handyman, Terry. How you doing, Terry?
Good. How are you, Vicki?
I'm doing great. You know, this project was absolutely perfect for Terry because it utilized all of his skills. And believe me, this guy's got a lot of them. How about that for an intro, huh?
Thank you very much.
Okay, so Terry, I said to you, I want to build a wooden walkway through this little shade garden of mine. And you said, sounds easy. What's your opinion now that you're almost done with it?
Well, it's still easy, just time consuming.
Time consuming. You've been out here about a week working on this, right? Okay, so tell me the steps that you went through to build it, because this is totally different than I've seen before.
Right. Well, first we took out all your old walkway stones.
That was probably one of the toughest jobs, right?
What I did was I made some freeform squares to put our post in. Because of our grading, I knew we were going to have to drop sections.
Yeah, so, because I didn't want us to come in and just level it all off, because I didn't want to disturb as many plants, you know, or as few plants as possible. But I've never seen people build like the boxes like that, but you attached each one of the posts to the corner and they were just freestanding little stages. And
then it was easier to dig our footing holes, because I knew how deep to go and where to put them.
Yep. And so you dug the holes with post hole digger. That was a hard work. I saw you out here doing that. And then you went in and you added cement to each one, so everything is set individually.
We leveled everything up, and then I cemented each post in.
Well, one of the problems that we had before, Terry, was a drainage issue over here, and that's why the stepping stones weren't working. How have you eliminated that as a future problem?
Well, I brought in some drainage stone, and each of our posts are at least an inch off the ground. And then the stone will help the water drain right out without any standing water.
Okay, and I know that we're going to leave the boards a little bit apart from each other, so the water will just run down and dissipate out that way.
Right, and that was just a aesthetic thing. It would have been okay with close boards.
Okay. Okay, so you got them all in. You got them. I love the little step downs that we're doing. I like that. That was a great idea. So we're not just like a ramp going through.
Right.
So now you're going to be putting all the boards on the top of it, and it's kind of flaring out at this end.
Yeah, we put flares on the front and the back.
Okay. And I like that little side trip that you made for me there over to the power boxes.
Well, just in case you lose power, you don't want to be stepping in mud.
Yeah, I like that idea, you know. So, okay, so we're going to put it down. What about a finish on this? Do you think that we need to put a finish on it?
It depends on the look. You don't have to. If you want it a little darker, we can stain it. But we do need to wait a while because it is wet wood.
Okay, so if we just let it go by itself, it'll just age into a nice gray finish like cypress does, right?
Yes, and then you'll get the colors from the rotted leaves and whatnot, which will make it look nice.
Yeah. Well, I think it's looking just fantastic. I can't wait for you to get finished on it. I know you want to get finished because it's been like a lot of dirt you've been hauling out of here and a lot of rocks and cement.
A lot of concrete coming into it.
Yeah, yeah, but it's looking absolutely great. It's exactly what I wanted to go through my shade garden. Let you get back to it. Now, I chose for us to use southern cypress for this walkway. I love the way that it naturally ages into a beautiful gray color and how dependable it is over the years. But before I made the decision, I talked with Hal Mitchell and got some really good tips about working with cypress. Take a look. Hal, I'm thinking about doing a raised walkway for the side of my house, and I've been looking at a lot of different alternative lumbers to use for that, the typical pressure-treated lumber or redwood or different ones. And on a project that we did not too long ago, we worked with cypress. Would this be a good application for cypress as well?
Absolutely. Cypress is suited perfectly for that, just because it's decay resistant naturally due to an oil that's contained in it called cypress-tine. So it works perfectly for those applications, both for decay, rot, and bug resistance.
Well, you know, it's so funny because up till like a couple of years ago, I didn't hear anybody talking about cypress, and now I'm seeing it in magazines and I'm hearing people talk about it. Tell me, why do you think that it's becoming a more and more popular species to be used in projects?
I think it's really been embraced with the green movement, particularly because it's durable for exterior application without any additional chemical treatment. So it's very safe. Your children can walk on it. It's fine for marine contact without any additional chemical treatment.
Well, that's a great product, because we always like to try and use things that are friendly to the environment as possible. Let's talk about sustainability. Tell me how they harvest cypress trees.
Cypress is typically harvested along the coastal areas, and we're pretty proud of the fact that it's very naturally renewable, and that the growth to harvest ratio is 2.3 to 1. So it self-generates, so it doesn't have to be replanted. So once it's harvested, the cypress forests actually regenerate themselves and are ready for removal again in about 40 years.
Really? That quickly? So it must grow pretty fast then?
It does, and typically it's a very diverse environment, and that there's small saplings all the way through the adult trees. Nothing's typically clear-cut, so there's a good...
You go in and specifically pinpoint certain trees and take them out depending upon what your needs are?
That's right.
Okay.
Most of the cypress is grown by private individuals, and they're the real stewards of the forest, and it's in their best interest to take care of their forest for their family to come. Most of the forest lands have been handed down through generations, so it's in their interest to really be stewards of the forest.
Okay, so it's kind of a family business then to go in there
Typically,
and harvest
yeah.
it. Okay, so let's talk about, you know, it's the South. Is that primarily the growing fields for it?
Here in North America it is, and it's really renowned for its beauty. So a lot of the general areas like New Orleans, particularly the coastal region along the South, have used cypress for many years now with good results, and it handles the really difficult atmosphere
that you get down there.
The difficult climates, the weather
Exactly.
swing.
Well, does that mean that primarily it's just being used in the South, or are you finding people are using it for projects that are on the West Coast as well?
It's interesting. Again, with the green movement, and cypress doesn't need to be treated with chemicals. So we found that the green people have really embraced the cypress, and we're starting to see it used throughout North America. We even export a bit into particularly Japan and to the Caribbean islands.
Really? You know, I look at cypress, and somebody asked me the other day, they said, well, what would you compare it to? And that's my question to you. What other type of species that we're, you know, familiar with using in building projects would you compare cypress to?
Typically, it's compared against western red cedar just for its exterior applications, but cypress has an additional beauty that makes it suitable for interior application as well.
Okay, so now interior, what are people using it for on the inside? Because I've only seen it on the outside.
Sure. We see a lot of judges panels made out of cypress, wainscoting, ceilings, but also for furniture, for doors, for shutters. It makes a beautiful product.
Wow, just all the way across the board.
Yeah.
Now, are they staining it, or are they letting it age into its own silvery gray color? Because that's what I love about it.
It depends on the application. We see a lot of it is allowed to age, particularly you put some type of UV retardant in the application initially, and then just to let it age naturally throughout the years.
Okay, so let's talk just for a minute then about treating it when you're done. Okay, so when I finish my walkway, what should I do? Should I let it wait a little while before I put a sealer on it, or go right in and do it? Tell me the process.
It typically depends on the moisture content that you begin with. So if it's truly green, you would want to wait a while. But if you have a kiln-dried product, you can go ahead and apply a sealant to it soon after application. Typically, we recommend an oil-based sealant.
Okay, okay. And then if I wanted to put color over that, I can do that as well?
Sure.
Right. Do I have to do it every few years like you do regular deck outside?
It needs typical treatment. If it's done properly, particularly if you're going to use it for exterior siding, an oil-based primer followed by a paint, and you typically will last 15 to 20 years.
Oh, wow. That's not very much maintenance to have to do to it at all. Now, if I wanted to age just into its own silvery gray, do I still put a sealant on it?
I would recommend a sealant. You may not want to use the UV inhibitor, but just a nice oil-based sealant, and then allow it to age naturally.
Okay, and then do I have to redo that as well?
You would.
Okay.
If you don't have to, but it's preferred typically.
Okay.
If you want to prevent just any checking or in-splitting as well.
Okay. Wow, so this is pretty easy. That's what I'm looking for, because it is a garden path that I'm planning, and I don't want to have to be out there doing a lot of maintenance to it as well. Well, you know, I think that it's always great to be able to use new materials and experiment with them, and I love sharing them with my viewers, and especially if they're green and sustainable, I think that's a real plus for everybody. So,
particularly here in the Charlotte market, most of this material is sourced locally, so it's really a good fit for this. So
reduce our carbon footprint to boot, right?
Absolutely. There's a lot of sequestered carbon in the walkways and the pergolas.
Okay, I appreciate that a lot. Thanks a lot, Hal. It's good information.
Thank you very much.
Shade is sometimes considered a negative in gardening because a lot of people think that it limits the number of plants that the gardener has to work with. That's not true at all. There are so many wonderful plants that you can put out in a shade garden, and I can tell you right now, this is a lot nicer place to be working on a hot summer afternoon than out in the blazing sun. Now, I wanted my pathway to just kind of wander through this part of my yard because in a shade garden, all the variety of plants that you can use, they're sort of like discovering little jewels all along the way. You know, imagine for yourself the last time you walked down a path in a woodland setting, notice how, you know, right around the corner you saw something that caught your eye and it was like unexpected. Well, that's what I'm going to keep in mind as I start to develop this part of my garden. Now, when I first moved here, my landscaper took these plants. They were all scattered all over the property. And he took the ones that I wanted to put in the shade area and just placed them wherever, kind of like a holding garden. So I'll have a lot of transplanting that I have to do as I start to develop this. And I'm going to keep that element of surprise right there in my mind the entire time that I build this beautiful garden. You know, another thing is color. A lot of people think you can't have color in a shade garden. You can have great colors, but you're not working with really bright, blazing yellows or vibrant reds. Instead, you're working with whites and soft pastels and pinks and beautiful, beautiful shades of green and variegated leaves. I've already started, as I said, with some of the plants in this area, and I'm going to keep some of them. Primarily, one of the ones I'm going to be keeping are the ferns. Ferns are wonderful in shade gardens. There are so many varieties. I've already started adding several types to this garden. Holly ferns are evergreens and Japanese painted ferns. They are so airy and they're so light. Maidenhair ferns, gosh, I love those. They're so delicate and so sweet, but they're very hardy once you get them established, and if you can keep the rabbits off of them. Ground covers like Pachysandria and English ivy with variegated leaves, well, they'll add great texture and color to your shade garden. Hostas, they're probably perhaps my favorites. When I moved here, there were lots of hostas all over the yard. They were temporarily relocated here, and now that the walkway is almost in, I can start transplanting them and dividing them and putting them where I want them to be. You know, one of the things that I love about a hosta is that you can get dozens of hostas from just one hosta plant. You know, I've got one here that I'm going to be transplanting, and take a look at it. See all of this burnt foliage on it? Well, this is what happens when you put a hosta in the sun. So that's why we've dug this one up. We're going to divide it out, and it's going to go into the new shade garden. So if you've got hostas around your house and you're wondering what the heck's happening to them, it's too much sunshine. Okay, find a nice little shady spot, dig them up, and do just like I'm going to show you how to do right now. Okay, the thing that you need for this is you need to have a pair of nippers so you can remove the foliage from it. And I'm just going to go in here and cut off the foliage and leave it about 2 inches long. All right, now if I were doing this, and you can divide this out in the springtime, if you're doing that, you would not cut the foliage off like I'm doing here. But because it's the fall time, the foliage is going to be dying off now anyway. I'm going to cut it off so the plant doesn't have to support it during the time it's kind of going through a little bit of a shock. And I won't have to try to work around all the foliage. All right, the fall is the best time, though, to transplant any of your perennials. You know, think of them this way. Put them where they can sleep all winter, so when they wake up in the spring, they're in their new home. Isn't that cute? I love that. Okay, so I've got it trimmed off here and get a little bit more foliage out of your way so you can see what I'm doing here. You know, I started out with about 2 hosta plants at my house when I used to live in Michigan, and I started dividing them out and putting them around my property, and then before you know it, I was giving it to my dad, and my dad was putting it on his property, and then my friends, they just go crazy. And I love them. But no, you don't ever have to divide them. You can keep them in one big clump. But if you're like me, I like to share my plants. Okay, so now we're down to this section, and we have a big clump of dirt here to deal with. I'm going to take a kitchen knife, and you want to use a really sharp knife, because we're going to come in here and put this down and just start cutting away. Hear that? Sounds kind of a little unnerving, but we're just cutting through the roots. And I'm going to kind of, you can almost tell where this sort of self-separating itself. See where this little clump is here and that clump? That's what I'm going to just follow right along that line. Put my knife down in there and cut. Pull it back like that. Just like cutting a birthday cake. Look at that slice right there. See that? See all of the roots that we have here? This is all we need to sustain this plant. Try to leave the dirt intact. Don't try to clear it off the roots. Don't make it get like super shocked. Leave it like this. These little roots right here need to stay close to the top of the ground. And so when you find the place that you want to place it, dig a nice deep hole about 2 inches bigger than this piece that you have. Put a little bit of good soil in the bottom of it and work it in. Maybe a little bit of fertilizer. Plant it down in there and then pull the dirt back to it and pack it lightly down around it. Don't make the mistake a lot of gardeners make. Don't pile the dirt up past the neck of your plant. Always retransplant or always transplant your plants and keep the dirt at the same level it was when you dug it out of the ground. Okay? My dirt has to stop right here. That's all I have to do. And then because we're going into the fall, and especially if you're in the northern climates, like my dad in Michigan, you're going to want to mulch it in really nice with some old leaves or pine mulch or something around it. So that is all it takes to divide out a hosta. If you look at this big, beautiful clump I have right here, you can tell that I can make one here, another clump here. I can get about 6 clumps out of this one plant. You know what? I'm going to fill up my shade garden really quick, and I might even have one to share with a friend. A shade garden can be very colorful. The Virginia bluebell is a good example. It blooms in early to mid-spring and continues blooming through midsummer. The flowers are very pretty, light bluish purple. Ohio horsemint is a perennial plant that likes medium shade to sun. Honeybees and bumblebees are regular visitors. It blooms from May through July and grows 16 to 24 inches tall. It makes excellent flowers for dried floral arrangements. A heavy shaded area without much moisture is the perfect growing conditions for a bush poppy mallow. The magenta flowers appear in June and in July. It can grow to heights of 24 to 30 inches. Wild Sweet Williams is a lovely showy early bloomer. It likes partially shaded gardens with good rich soil. But beware, rabbits just love this sweet flower. A very attractive plant is the dowdy skullcap. It has numerous flower clusters that bloom a long time at the end of the season in August and September. It can grow as tall as 40 inches and spread 20 inches wide. It's a very showy plant. Certainly one of my favorites is the wild geranium. It blooms from spring to early summer. The pale rose or violet purple stems are arranged in loose clusters of 2 to 5 at the top of each stem. It grows well in both dry and moist soil. Celandine poppy is a perfect plant for a moist shade garden. It comes up early and forms a dense 12 to 16 inch cover and remains there until frost. It blooms 2-inch yellow flowers in April and May. You and your hummingbirds will love the Indian pink. It's a long-living, hardy perennial. It prefers average moisture and dapple shade. It blooms in June and July. Jacob's ladder is a clump-forming perennial. Clusters of white and lavender blue bell-shaped blooms appear in the early summer. Wild pink is a beautiful addition to your shade garden. It performs best in sandy soil. Its bright pink color stands out beautifully against green hostas and other foliage. Woodland spiderwort is an attractive plant for shady areas. The pink or purplish flowers appear in the early spring, then as the weather heats up, the plant goes dormant. When the weather cools off again in the fall, the plant will reappear and possibly bloom for a second time. If you have a light, shady, moist area, try Meadow Beauty. It grows naturally in sandy, wet, acidic soil and tolerates periodic flooding. It spreads easy, so keep a close eye on it. These are just a few of the great variety of colorful shade plants that you could add to your garden.
Do you want to know more about the projects today or our guests? Visit us on the web. You're going to find great behind-the-scenes shots, streaming video, project ideas. We even have an e-newsletter with tips and ideas. It's foryourhome.com. I've got lots of shady afternoon projects lined up for this new space in my garden, and I hope that the next time you find yourself with a damp, low, shady space in your yard, that you'll celebrate the opportunity to maybe build a raised walkway and create your own shade garden. Now join us next time right here on For Your Home when we're going to be lending a hand to refurbish a house for an American vet. Hope to see you soon right here on For Your Home.